Aloha, good afternoon, and welcome to the second episode of Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Alvalati, and I am the Majority Leader of the Hawaii House of Representatives. Since we last talked story, so much has happened. The Capitol has opened up. We've had hearings in person and virtual. We've had our budget pass over to the Senate. We've had the indoor mask mandate drop, as well as safe travels across the state. We had our first art at the Capitol in 2 years. And now, today, we are on the eve of the 48th day, yes, the 48th day of the legislative session. So much has happened and so much more is about to happen in the last 3 to 4 weeks of the legislature. Today, I have a very special guest. The focus of this episode is going to be about housing. And we're going to start off with one of the biggest initiatives, a historic landmark initiative with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Today I have with me Tyler Iokepa Gomes, Deputy to the Chair of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So I'm very excited. You've been with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands since?
2019, 3 years,
okay.
Almost 3 years.
And then in your role as Deputy to the Chair, what are some of the things that you find yourself doing on a day-to-day basis?
There's the normal stuff you'd expect from administering a state agency, and then there are unique things like as a result of the pandemic, the department was thrust into a lot of broadband money. Historically, the department was not known for broadband development, but now we have to. So there are all kinds of issues that pop up, and the more unusual they are, usually that's where I come in.
And one of those unusual opportunities was with this legislative session. As we were heading into this legislative session, legislative leadership on both the House and the Senate was looking at possibly, unsure economic times, but as the as the economy has recovered, we're seeing this boom in money. And so this has given us an opportunity to do something really, really important with Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And so I know, we put a big task on you and Chair Isla with figuring out how can we strategically invest $600 million in advancing the mission of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. So since opening day, tell me what's happened with that bill, and I believe it's House Bill 2511.
Right. Well, there's been a lot of excitement. I think, first of all, we're very grateful for both houses of the legislature being willing to explore this with us. So the bill started out as an idea. I think, like you said, people wanted to know, how do we make meaningful change? How do we address the wait list? How do we address affordable housing? And how do we do it in a creative way? And from that, the discussion really came around to what can you do with a couple $100 million? Mm-hmm. And the answer is not a lot, at least not in the scope of Hawaiian Homelands, right? We have a wait list of 28,000 Native Hawaiians who are waiting for an award. 600 million doesn't really go that far. It makes a dent, but it's not a lot of money. And I think getting into the weeds with our legislators and being able to look at, how far does a dollar really go? Mm-hmm. Especially in light of the pandemic, we've seen construction costs just blossom in the last couple of years, in the last few months alone. And so knowing that these processes take a lot of money, sort of managing expectations, but also being forced to think really, like I said, creatively has been the goal. So we put out all of our projects that we thought the money could fund. We put out some creative ideas, which I think people have heard about now, such as mortgage assistance or down payment assistance, in which we would offer someone the opportunity to provide up to $100,000 for a down payment on a fee simple house off of Hawaiian Homelands, or towards their mortgage, also in fee simple off of Hawaiian Homelands, with the ask that they remove themselves from the wait list. And that would do a couple of things. First, Hawaiian Homes doesn't provide fee simple interests for beneficiaries, right? And so the idea that we might be able to provide Native Hawaiians with very real, tangible, perpetual interests in land, that's huge, right? That really falls within the scope of rehabilitation, which is the whole purpose of the act in our department. But also, for those folks who are, just shy of being homeowners, for example, and could use a $100,000 step up in order to make that a reality, if we can help them off of the wait list and get them into homes, that means that the projects that we're already doing can move further down the wait list and ideally help more Native Hawaiians on the wait list.
Now, you were telling me earlier, this idea has been floated, it's being vetted in the legislature now. What's been the reaction amongst some beneficiaries about this opportunity for a down payment assistance?
I think the early reactions were surprise, maybe uncomfortability with the idea of what do you mean take my name off the wait list. It's been characterized as a buyout or a buy-off, but I think it's better characterized as a buyback. Because if we can help Native Hawaiians gain home ownership in a fee simple structure off of Hawaiian homelands, that's huge. Right now we're expanding the scope of what Native Hawaiian, not property ownership, but Native Hawaiian ties to Hawaii look like. And that's huge to us in a cultural perspective, but also in fulfillment of the act. So I think the more we're able to explain what the act does, we're actually seeing more positive responses. We get people coming in every day asking about when we can expect to see this money, how can they sign up for it. The number of calls have exponentially increased, and the number of requests for new applications has skyrocketed over the last month. So we know that there is definitely a demand for something like this.
Demand and interest. So that's really good. So, and when this bill had moved over from the House and the Senate, it was a little bit more not defined what that what that down payment might be, but I think it's already moved over to the Senate. And have they put a number to it?
Yeah, so the Senate, the House bill was a lot more flexible. I think it looked at the $600 million holistically and how it could move. The Senate bill, and rightfully so, challenged the idea of, well, if we really wanted to see where all of these dollars are going and ensure that it gets spent expeditiously and efficiently, how do we maybe in a more focused way direct the money? And so the amount on the Senate side, I think, is about $113 million for down payment assistance or mortgage assistance. And then it's about $487 million, give or take a few pennies, for infrastructure projects. And
so those infrastructure projects, let's talk about that a little bit, because when the bill was in the House, we learned, and we've known this, but I think it becomes more clear as you have to talk about it within the context of language in a bill. We know that infrastructure is a huge challenge for DHHL. So can you speak to a little bit to that and how some of those monies might actually be going to specific infrastructure projects now identified in not the Senate bill, the Senate draft of the House bill?
Sure. I think it's important to acknowledge that at the outset of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, not the best lands were given to the department or Native Hawaiians in general, right? Lands that were incredibly rural, that completely lacked infrastructure. And we have had 100 years to deliver on that, but it's still really costly. And so when we say that infrastructure costs a lot of money, we're talking about bringing water to rural areas. We're talking about bringing electricity and now broadband and sewer capacity. And, if there are no active developments in those areas, it becomes very hard for our county systems to be able to engage as well, because they don't have the resources to create a brand new, neighborhood out in these rural areas. And so the challenge is trying to figure out, how do we prioritize money? And there's just not enough to go around. That's true for all state departments. So it's not purely a DHHL issue, but at the end of the day, we're challenged with, well, we've got a small pot of money, which projects can it go to? Oftentimes it's, what's already in the pipeline of, well, we've got plans to go here. How do we build out Kapolei, for example, or maybe slightly less rural areas on Maui? And that's sort of how that process works. In terms of this bill, the projects that are listed in the Senate draft of the House bill, we expect that those units would come online with homes in bed over the course of the next 8 years, and would deliver up to 2,900 new units. Just for perspective, right now our 5-year projection is only 1,500 units. Some years, just based on funding, we're only able to deliver several hundred units. So close to 3,000 units in 8 years. That's monumental. So
this really does put a dent in what you are able to offer. And I really encourage folks to visit capital.hawaii.gov to look up House Bill 2511, because what the Senate did was they challenged you. They challenged you guys to come up with some infrastructure projects. You have infrastructure projects on all islands here, Maui, Kauai, Big Island, Oahu. You want to speak to any of these that are moving, that you think are going to be moving quickly?
Yeah, I think there are projects that are obviously a little smaller but could use the funding. We haven't done a lot of things on some of the neighbor islands. Kauai's got some projects in there. Hawaii Island has a few things both east and west. And so I think being able to make sure that this money is spread evenly across the state is, one, incredibly important. But two, I think it actually facilitates a stronger discussion on what affordable housing looks like for our state's future outside of the urban core of Honolulu, because we have to accept that land is a limited and finite resource on Oahu, and at a certain point, we're just not going to be able to fit everyone in, Kaka'ako or
Yes.
Honolulu, which is why Kapolei is actually one of the biggest areas for development in that Senate draft, because we've still got a lot of land out there. It's already mostly developed. It's got a lot of infrastructure already in place, which makes the costs a little lower because we've already got experience doing all of that out there.
And something I think people forget is that this is but one bill in many bills. So we're looking at bills about important ag lands, about transit-oriented development. So all of this also folds into some of that as well, because Kapolei is an essential part of the transit-oriented development scene. Let me ask you about one more bill. So, what some folks don't realize sometimes outside of the legislature is that we have bills kind of moving in tandem. So when we crossed over our House Bill 2511 to the Senate, they crossed over their Senate Bill 3247 to us that also had to do with Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And in this, we're asking you to develop a strategic plan to meet applicant preferences for single-family homes or rent-to-own single-family homes, duplexes, apartments, or townhouses. Can you tell us a little bit about what you already have in your planning process for these different types of home ownership models?
Sure. So we've got a pretty well-developed planning process in place already that we've really built out over the last 30 years that looks at planning in scales, right? So there's the general plan, which is a 20-year horizon of how we expect the department to move. And then we have our island plans, which sort of set up the land use designations on that island, how we expect each parcel to be used. And that's done through beneficiary consultation and input. And then we get really specific on the regional level. And so the projects that we do generally are falling within the scope of both the island and the general plans. And so the request to have us prepare a strategic plan should be informed from that. We're actually in the middle of updating the general plan. We're hitting about the 20-year mark. And so hopefully the information that we've gathered from the general planning process and also our 2020 beneficiary study should be sufficient to help us build out a reasonable plan for how to spend $600 million.
Okay. So what do you think is going to be the biggest obstacle? I mean, I think, you've got both House and Senate in concept agreeing to this strategic investment. For you, boots on the ground, what do you think is going to be some of your biggest challenges?
I think it's really going to come down to the contracting. There are only so many contractors who can build homes and at this scale. We've got a mix of TOD, right? In the Kapolei proposal, there's some TOD projects. So there's only even fewer developers who can do, TOD and traditional single-family homes. And so I think, there's a couple other issues, right? We know that water is incredibly...
and that's going to be affecting development across the board on Oahu, right?
And so I think we need to plan for that as well. So I think getting the money out, just in terms of getting qualified applicants with ideal bids, and then being able to do that in the scope of what potential water resource limitations there could be over the next few years, I think those would be the biggest challenges.
So in addition to this big strategic investment that both House and Senate want to do, there's always little bills running around having to deal with DHHL. Talk to me about what this maintenance of infrastructure, county maintenance of infrastructure bill, Senate Bill 879.
Sure. So the department has built out sewers and water lines all over the state for its homesteads. There are some homesteads with very, very old infrastructure. I'm talking Papakolea, Waimanai, Waimanalo. And the department has spent a lot of money keeping or maintaining those systems, which are incredibly costly. That money could be used for developing housing, but instead we're using it to repair sewer. At the same time, our beneficiaries are paying their county taxes, which means they should have sewer service and water service maintained by the counties. And so this bill sort of fixes, I think, a better statewide strategy to ensure cooperation between the counties and the department in getting our infrastructure up to code, because the older ones may no longer be up to code. So getting it up to code and then getting it transferred to the county system so that that responsibility can be shared. And then ideally freeing up resources at DHHL that we can then put towards new development.
And like you said, it's a fairness issue, right? If individuals are paying county taxes, then they should also be getting the services.
And I've got some staff who would appreciate not doing the late night sewer calls, so that would be nice for them as well.
So tell me how important, like GET exemptions, what does that mean to DHL? What is this bill, Senate Bill 1121, GET exemption for all gross proceeds?
I think this actually speaks to a larger issue in that many times DHHL is treated like a private developer. And I think we need to be more consistent in that, one, we're not. Two, we're a very unique state entity, right? We've originated out of a federal act. We have a public trust responsibility. The GET exemption would free up millions of dollars that are paid out every year in taxes for, what is a very different purpose, right? We're not the traditional developer. We're not building homes for profit. We're building homes to help the state fulfill its compact that it made with the federal government as a condition of statehood. So that would save the trust money in order to help us put money towards other resources. So this is an example of, that was part of our package. That's an example of the department trying to think creatively about, okay, if there's not enough money to go around to raise, how do we cut on costs where, it's efficient to do so? And we thought that was one of those ways.
And this one seems to also be moving quickly too. Okay, talk to me about this one, because this one might be a little bit harder for people to understand. Prohibiting lessees who sell or transfer their interest in Hawaiian homelands from being placed on the waiting list. This is Senate Bill 2623 moving.
So that's not in the department's package, but what that bill proposes is to address a I don't want to call it a loophole, but an opportunity for beneficiaries who sell their lease once they're on Hawaiian homelands or transfer it. We've had instances where beneficiaries have then reapplied, gone back to the bottom of the wait list, and have bought off again, right? Because as a beneficiary, you could technically not wait. If someone is willing to sell you their property, you could just buy it, and then you don't have to wait. And so while it's not an incredibly rampant problem, there are circumstances where folks figured out that they could buy multiple times. This is the state's first step towards trying to limit that. It does require congressional approval, so it's got quite a bit of red tape it's got to get through at all levels, leading all the way up to Congress itself. But it does seek to address a really unique issue.
Well, and then also, I think it speaks to fairness as well, because you want to make sure that everyone who is on the wait list has waited in line, and there's people joining the wait list, right? And so you don't want to necessarily step in front of them if they've never had an opportunity.
That's right. I think we talk about it oftentimes in bites at the apple, and these are beneficiaries who have had one, sometimes two, sometimes 3 bites, and we've got to think about the people who have been on the wait list for decades and have never had a single bite, right?
Yeah. So tell me, this is kind of creative. Like, I saw this bill and I'm like, geothermal resources on Hawaiian homelands. Senate Bill 3195. What is that about, and what are you folks hoping to seek with this bill?
So that one's also not in our package, but we've supported it. And that bill is seeking money from the legislature to basically explore the opportunity for geothermal resource development on Hawaiian homelands for a couple of reasons. There's an opinion that says that geothermal resources originating on Hawaiian homelands are for Department of Hawaiian Homelands, which in and of itself could be a really strong economic resource if done correctly and if it's actually there. We've never done substantive studies to know whether or not we have resources on our lands, so this money would allow us to sort of explore that. But I think more importantly, it brings Native Hawaiians into an ongoing discussion that's actually happening in Indian community in the continental United States about energy independence, what energy sovereignty looks like, and how Native people can be in the driver's seat of their economic futures simply by looking at their energy generation resources and capitalizing on that.
So knowing that you have lands on Hawaii Island, clearly that would be the place where you guys are going to be doing the study, right?
I think so. That's probably makes the most sense. There are some known areas on other islands. Obviously,
really?
The further west you get, the smaller those chances get. We did some water work looking at water wells a few years ago that sort of gave us an indication of where we think there might be geothermal activity. And so, yeah, we'd probably focus primarily on the eastern islands because we already know that there's a good amount of activity there.
Well, I know that there was some interest, and I think I haven't delved too much into this, but like in New Zealand, right? They have very active development of geothermal resources, and that is a way for us to get to energy independence, as well as to put Native Hawaiians in the driver's seat, like you said. So is that kind of some of the modeling that you guys might be doing?
Absolutely.
Okay. We've got a few more minutes to go, so it's an exciting time for you. It's also a time of transition because there will be a new governor. What happens at the Department of Hawaiian Homelands? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but every department and agency must be thinking about this. Like, you have this huge opportunity to shape a program. What does the transition look like?
The transition will basically kick off in December, right? So when Governor Ige's term ends, that's when mine and the chairman's term ends in December. And so right now we're trying to make sure that things are in place to ensure continuity of government services, which is what all department agencies are thinking about. But we are in this very unique position of, in this year alone, or the last 2 years because of the pandemic, we have successfully managed to impress upon people the need for money at the department, and as a result, we've seen a lot of interest. It's not just the $600 million that you folks are contemplating. $200 million were inserted into the federal infrastructure bill, and while
broadband.
That's no, just for infrastructure.
Okay.
And while that remains to be passed, that demonstrates sort of a renewed sense of faith in the department's ability to deliver both at the state and federal levels. We've got about 90 million coming in broadband dollars. And so the transition really needs to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for the next administration to pick everything up and keep running. Because I think what we don't want to see are any balls dropped. We don't want to see any money lapsing, and we want to see that all of the things that this administration believes we could deliver with this money is actually delivered upon.
Well, it's been really fascinating to watch this bill and this initiative move through, because I think everyone is wanting this to succeed, and everyone is recognizing the importance of this moment in time to make a strategic investment. And I know I've also heard you say publicly, like, we could actually be making this investment like on an annual basis. No one can know what the future holds, but what is your one hope in this last minute or so for the department in reaching its goals with this investment?
Well, this year actually marks the 100th anniversary of the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. And so when we look at the last 100 years, my hope for the next 100, not just the next administration, is, continued delivery at or above the rate that we're doing it now. And the sort of unfortunate thing is DHHL really didn't hit its stride in development until the 80s or 90s, already 60 to 70 years into the act. And so, it would be incredible to see what more we could do developing at this pace for a full 100 years.
Well, I love the energy, Tyler, coming from you, and I know that Chair Isla is working his working his heart and soul into this measure as well. We have maybe 3 weeks of conference signing die. We're done on May 5th. So I really, really hope that we'll be sitting here together and looking at some historic legislation, because I think this is a moment in time. And I'm so glad that you're here with us on this journey and helping us shape the policy, like you said, not just for the next year, but for the next 100 years. On that note, I want to transition. Like I said earlier, we have reopened up the Capitol. For the first time in 2 years, we were able to invite to the Capitol the public as part of Art of the Capitol. So my staff and Olela have put together a community segment for you to welcome you and show you just how we had Art at the Capitol this year. Senator Brian Taniguchi, the mastermind of Art at the Capitol. How many years have you been doing Art at the Capitol?
Ooh, I guess it's 14 years now. Many years back, 15 years back, what happened was my wife and I had walked to the State Art Museum for First Friday, and we were walking around the exhibits and the paintings and stuff, and one of the docents came up to us and said, "Hey, you got all that art in the Capitol, and you guys, only the lobbyists can see it, the public can't see it, So I thought, I was like, yeah. And so I kind of thought about it. So maybe we could have like an open house, to at least showcase at least once a year, because we're so busy during session, and then after session, nobody, a lot of guys not here, right? So we tried to catch the first Friday.
So with the pandemic, we had to shut down, and we weren't able to open up. But right before the pandemic, you were doing some wonderful things, and we would have artists here. Can you describe like some of the bigger events that happened here for Art at the Capitol?
Sure. For the first number of years, we would pick art pieces here at the Capitol. The tapestries, the light fixtures, the Damien statue, the Milio Kalani statue. We'd do all those things, and would highlight what they were, and the artists that did them.
And there was a time when you had the artists come in as well, and they would talk.
Invited them to come to the Capitol. So we had about a dozen or more who would come different artists that would come. And we'd sit them out on the second floor, I think, and then they would talk with whoever wanted. We'd set tables for them, they would talk. We also did art for legislators so that they can kind of get a class. So we set up a class for legislators to do their own art. So, this is my landscape there, and that was my first portrait over there. And so, and then we've done it a number of times, different types of things. We did poetry this year.
Yeah.
And so we've done that. We've done what we call art on your wall, where we would interview legislators and they'll tell us what's their favorite art piece in their office.
Mm-hmm. So, pandemic, we're recovering from it. What was some of the highlights from this Art at the Capitol?
Well, the highlight from this Art at the Capitol this year was that we got to open it up. 2 years ago we canceled. Last year we just did a virtual art thing, and it wasn't, we don't know how well it went off. But this year we opened it up because the Capitol, we weren't really sure it was going to open, right? Mm-hmm. But we kept planning that it would, expecting it would, and it turned out that way, and we were able to open it up to the public. Now our public relations wasn't really great, but we did. I think we got at least probably about between 200 and 300 people who came to visit Art at the Capitol. And this year we had a wonderful edition. 2 days before the event, we got a call from Ballet Hawaii, and they said they wanted to perform here for Art at the Capitol. Now we have, for a number of years now, 5 or 6, 7 years, we've had the Hawaii Youth Symphony come, and they'll take 2 shifts of student artists, student performers to come and play quartets and stuff. And so it fills the air with music. And so this year, so we said, yeah, great. And so we had ballet, and then we got them to dance on the mosaic, which was amazing. It was just
can I just say, so literally, my daughter had the honor to dance in this group, and I literally 2 days, I will confirm what exactly you said. 2 days before, I got a call, and I was like, what? My daughter's performing? Okay, I guess I'll be there. But it was so beautiful.
It was really beautiful. It just, I think we got so many great comments about it, and it just added so much to the ambiance of the event. And so I think hopefully they'll try to, continue to do that every year. And so you'll be in charge of doing that.
So we have to acknowledge this. Senator Taniguchi, you are going to be retiring and not seeking re-election.
I'm not seeking re-election this year.
So for future legislators, what is your hope for Art at the Capitol moving forward?
I would hope that we would continue to do things. I always wanted to do something about koa in the building.
Fantastic.
Use of koa wood and the history of how they got all that koa wood. But we didn't do research on that yet. So those are 2 things that I'm thinking about passing on and trying to see if the next people who take care of Art at the Capitol can do that.
Well, this is a moment that's special, very special for me, because you're my partner, and I am just so appreciative of everything that you've done, and you have elevated art in the community, and we are going to miss you so dearly. So thank you so much.
Okay, all right, sure.
This year at Art at the Capitol, I was able to give a tour to members of the public coming through our office here. And it was wonderful, after a 2-year absence, to have everybody back so we can share this collection that belongs to the people of Hawaii. The first thing I show to people is this piece here. If you take a look at this, it's Shigeru Narikawa, called Peace of Mind. And when I come back from a stressful hearing, is the first thing I see in the office. It makes me just have a nice sigh of relief, and it reduces my stress level. Just a beautiful piece. The next piece is just over here. This piece by Margaret Barnaby is a stupendous piece. It's a print, and it's actually one of a pair, and it highlights a native bird species, the alala crow, on trees that are native to Hawaii, and especially trees from my district, which is a really important thing to me. So this has a personal meaning to me and our work here in the Water and Land Committee in the House. This photograph here by Elaine Mays is a very special one. It's of a rain-soaked forest of ironwood in Molokai, and it really reminds me of a place in my own district in Pololu Valley. just the peaceful feeling of being in a forest in the rain. Just very magical. This photograph is my favorite piece of art from the State Foundation on Culture and the Arts collection that we have in my office. It's a large format photograph by Matt Schallenberger. And the Schallenbergers actually live in my district, so this has a special meaning for me there. This is actually a photograph of a place just off the Hamakua coast, so it's very close to my district. And if you look at it, it looks like some otherworldly alien landscape. And it's actually, if you look carefully at it, there is a metal plate that looks like a spider or a crab that's out on a rock there. And in fact, what that is the base of a mast that held up a zip line that took bales of sugarcane from the plantation in the Hamakua coast, from the cliff top out to a ship waiting offshore to take the sugarcane to market. So it's of historical significance to our area that Matt Schallenberger has created into an otherworldly scene. Very, very special. Thank you for visiting our office. I really appreciate it.
Aloha and welcome back to Talk Story with House Majority. I hope you enjoyed that segment of Art at the Capitol, and it will be back next year in some form or fashion. Our topic for today is housing, and I'm so lucky today to have with me here Vice Chair Troy Hashimoto from Maui, who's Vice Chair of our Housing Committee. Troy, you heard a little bit about the $600 million initiative. You heard Tyler's first segment. What are your thoughts on our initiative to help DHHL address their affordable housing needs, and how does it impact the larger picture of affordable housing from your perspective as Vice Chair?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Majority Leader Belatti, for having me. I'm here on behalf of my chair, Rep. Nadine Nakamura of Kauai. I think we've been a very good team this past 2 years trying to tackle a lot of housing issues. I think housing is just one of the biggest issues in the front of our minds. I think we went through COVID, but housing is back. It's more expensive than ever. I think it takes up one of the biggest portions of our monthly budgets, and it's the biggest driving factor of affordability. And so I think housing for many years to come, like it was before COVID, will be top of mind, and we're going to have to continue addressing the situation more creatively than ever. And I think it's going to take a lot of us working on that issue. And I think DHHL is a big part of that solution. And I think one of the reasons why is that DHHL goes to families who live here, all Hawaiians, where you're leasing the land, you're not owning it. So hopefully, it'll stay local in perpetuity. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for housing mechanisms that can stay affordable in perpetuity. And I think that's one of the ways that we'll be able to address that large and looming concern of rising cost factors. And so I think it's a no-brainer to invest in more of Department of Hawaiian Homelands and trying to open that door so that more Hawaiians can stay on the land.
Now, you said it, you've been working with Chair Nakamura over the last 2 years, and you truly are like the dynamic duo, very good chair-vice chair partnership. So, over the last 2 years and seeing what you guys have done, from a big picture perspective, you guys are really focused on addressing all aspects and all spectrums of the need for housing. Can we talk about the large chunk? I think it's the workforce housing, the 60 to 120% area median income. What are some of the things that are moving now in the legislature addressing that kind of working family group?
Right. So before the pandemic, I think the legislature really made a big commitment in trying to address housing. We had this omnibus package, and then unfortunately COVID hit. And so I think a lot of it, we still try to keep alive what we could and to move it along. But I think now it's to bring a lot of that back into focus. And I think a lot of it is in investments into our rental revolving housing fund, our dwelling unit revolving fund. And I think we're going to continue to make those necessary investments into helping developers to develop for that target group, which is between all the way from 30 to 140 AMI. We're really taking a look at, we want to create that entire spectrum. I think this year we're really focusing on the 60 to 100% area median income. For City and County of Honolulu, that is about 60 to 106,000. So 106,000 would be a family of 4. And that's really what we're trying to target, that type of family. So it's not the very low income, it's more working families that need that housing.
So what are some of the professions in this? Who specifically are we helping?
Teachers, police officers, firefighters. I think, the typical, working families that are office workers. So these are moderate incomes. I think, when you have two of them, though, it's starting to push you into the 140% AMI, which, because I think you think about, you have two people working and make 60,000 each, it's 120, so it pushes you out of the 100% area median income already. So, but there's still a lot who maybe one is a teacher and maybe one doesn't make as much, and so you still can stay below that 106,000 for a family of four. And so that to me is the gap group that we really need to be building for, because those are the ones that are truly looking for housing and may not be able to afford what's out there and under market rents.
So just basic mechanics, when the legislature talks about investing these monies in the rental housing revolving fund, what agency is going to it, and then what is it that they're doing? They're helping development, right? Can you explain a little bit about the mechanics of that?
Right. So it's incredibly complicated to develop one of these developments. And so I think there's a lot of methods in doing it, but the Hawaii Housing and Finance Development Corporation takes the lead. So developers go to them to seek financing mechanisms. And so they can ask HHFDC for a certain amount to complete their project. In exchange, they have to follow the income requirements for certain projects. So you'll hear in the news it's 100% affordable. I know a lot of people say, well, it's not affordable in their minds, but it's affordable in the minds of Hawaii Housing and Finance Development Corporation. And sometimes they'll do mixed developments where they'll be paying market, some will be paying, maybe 100%, maybe some 60%. So they'll mix it up a little bit in some of those developments. So it really depends on how we make some of these development work. And I think it's trying to figure out how to continue to incentivize these developers to develop more. Because I think at the end of the day, partially it's a supply and demand issue. So if we can have these financing mechanisms readily available through the state, I think it'll hopefully incentivize developers to do a little more over time.
Yeah, and then, okay, so in addition to these we're talking about $150, $200 million. We're looking at significant investments to address this gap financing through HHFDC, the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. But you folks are also focused on another portion of the housing needs. And tell me a little bit about the housing subsidies for families who are on temporary assistance or who are in the First to Work programs. Are we also looking at some of those kinds of subsidies?
Yeah, so of course we have to look at all spectrums, because this is not only a problem for working families, it's also for those who may be having problems, in terms of gaining the income that they need. So we also have to look at the lower spectrum, income spectrum as well, because they also need a lot of assistance. And those are the type of families who are the most vulnerable to going houseless, and we don't want to see that. And so we need to make tremendous investments in those type of programs. I think one of the things that Chair Nakamura really looked into this past interim before the legislative session start was she looked at the TANF program that we were running throughout the state of Hawaii. It's the temporary assistance for needy families. And she found that we weren't spending all of the funds in that program.
And these are federal funds.
These are federal funds that we get on a yearly basis. I believe it's about $95 million every single year. And we were only spending about 40-some million of it. And so there was a tremendous amount of money that was still left. I think you can stay on that program for about 60 months. Of course, the average amount of families are staying for about 24 months. And so one of the initiatives that we're pushing through this year, and we hope that it gets to the finish line, is in addition to just that initial subsidy that you would get through the TANF program, we'll also try and give you a housing subsidy, because we believe that, of course, cost of housing is going up tremendously, and so housing needs to have some type of incentive. And so we're hoping that because you can give a little bit more, maybe it'll allow someone to make their budget work in a more efficient manner.
And it's giving them a little bit more over a longer period of time so that they can then, in fact, manage their budget. And the First to Work program is getting these families into working situations.
That's right. It's all about stability, and I think these people getting onto that program are really in an unstable situation. So I think that's the goal. The goal is to make sure that they can eventually get off of it and have a successful life after that. But we want to give them that lifeline, and we believe having the combination of the two incentives will really help.
And again, it's leveraging state money with federal money.
That's right.
Right. There's another shallow subsidy program that we're looking at to address the needs of kupuna Because we know that's also another vulnerable group. Can you talk about that, Bill, a little bit?
Yeah, so I, as the co-convener of the Kupuna Caucus, we talk a lot with seniors to really understand what are the pain points that they are going through as well. And the thing that you always hear is pain points about how you have a fixed income and you don't have enough to make ends meet. And so I think one of the things, again, it's sometimes on the brink of homelessness. And so we were taking a look at a program to figure out how do we help Kupuna with housing. And I think we looked at all the programs that we had. I think one school of thought was, let's create a new program with the Hawaii Housing Public Authority to see if they had any ideas on creating a new program. But we actually already have something called the Rent Supplement Program. And so we're really trying to target the Rent Supplement Program for Kupuna for 62 plus. And so we'll be able to add more into that realm of 62 plus so that there's even more subsidy for them using the Rent Supplement Program. And why we want to use the existing program is because we want to get it off the ground very quickly. The longer we wait, the longer people don't have this subsidy, and we want to make sure, again, we want to get to that stability of housing.
And what we're talking about are Kupuna 62 or older who are homeless or about to become homeless.
That's
so
right.
Really we're talking about some of the most vulnerable.
Instability, that's right. So that's the biggest thing. We want to make sure that we can get as many people on a stable ground as possible, as quick as we can. We know coming off of COVID, it's been very, very difficult for a lot of, all types of people. But there's so many federal programs and state programs there to assist, and we want to make sure they're deployed quickly.
So really quickly, because you mentioned the Hawaii Public Housing Authority, but there's also another funding mechanism of funding vacant units or to renovate vacant units. Can you talk about that? Because, it says 264 units, but that's units. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found out from the Hawaii Housing Public Authority is that they have these units that are sitting there because they have to go in and they do a rotation of renovating these units so they're suitable and livable for new tenants moving into public housing. And I think they just have never been able to catch up with all of the renovations, and they have a few of these units sitting vacant, and there's 64 of them. And I think that was, in our minds, something that could easily be remedied. And so we're giving them some funding to take care of that in an efficient manner so that they can renovate it and get people in quickly. And hopefully that'll allow them to then get back into a quicker rotation of making sure that most of their units are filled and not vacant.
So it's a really good example of the kind of low-hanging fruit. Like
That's right.
let's deal with this
Yeah.
really quickly.
Yeah.
So in addition to all of these, funding opportunities, wanted to talk a little bit about some rental discrimination initiatives that you folks worked on, and you worked a lot on this. So I know that there's a bill moving, and people, are wanting to make sure that there's a supply of Section 8 housing out there. But what's the issue behind that?
Yeah, so I think the coronavirus was a big wake-up call for a lot of housing for Section 8 in terms of how do we get people into these units. I think the federal government realized this is a really good avenue to make sure to get people into units is to expand the Section 8 program. So they did. So there was what we call emergency housing vouchers, and a lot of them were administered and over a short period of time. And I think that was a very successful program. They got a lot of people into a lot of housing, but because they wanted to get it out quickly, they didn't follow their normal process. And so over the interim, we wanted to understand what were the mechanisms that were getting these people into housing very quickly and see what we could adopt into making sure that when we get back to some normalcy, when these emergency housing vouchers became just normal housing vouchers, how can we sustain people being able to get into and utilize their Section 8 vouchers? And so we put a working group together from all facets of the community, from landlord, tenants, landlords, Section 8, advocates, to those who are working at the city and the counties who also administer Section 8 vouchers. And we brought them together to really understand what are the things that we can use to incentivize getting people to take Section 8 vouchers. Because actually, if you're a landlord, you may not want to take a Section 8 voucher because there's a lot of work involved. And so I think a lot of what we came to conclude was that we needed to create a little more incentives for landlords to really want to become a partner with those who have Section 8 vouchers and to accept them in an easier manner. And so I think some of the things that we're looking at, we believe truly in incentives because we believe that Section 8 is a partnership. The landlord needs to want to rent to Section 8 tenants because you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to work with the government agency who administers the Section 8 voucher. And so in our bill that we proposed, we really were about making sure that Section 8 landlords had protection if for some reason there was damage to their unit that was above and beyond the security deposit that we could reimburse through state funds, any additional damage. So that was something that is in the bill that we are proposing, and it's moving forward. In addition, we wanted to give incentives if you sign up for the Section 8 program. So we will give you a one-time signing bonus to participate in the Section 8 program. And also, if there's some type of vacancy between tenants, we also want to give you some type of incentive so that you don't have to take that vacancy out of your own pocket. So those are a lot of components that are included in our incentives bill that we're moving forward, that we're hoping to push more people to get involved with Section 8.
Okay, homelessness. Okay, now we have to shift to another portion of this. Homelessness in Ohana zones and this notion of creating an office on homelessness and housing solutions. Talk to me a little bit about what are some of the plans to expand Ohana zones and then this new office.
Well, Ohana zones was obviously a creature of the legislature. I think a few years ago that was our signature program to really dig into the homeless issue. And I think to me it was very, very successful. I think there's a lot of successes through Ohana zones. At least on Maui, we were able to renovate a vacant dorm at Maui College and turn it into transitional housing. And that was through the Ohana Zones program, utilizing some of their exemptions. We did get some help from HHFDC, but primarily it was because of Ohana Zones we were able to renovate those dorms, and now it's being used very, very, it's at capacity, so everyone loves living there. And I think there's a lot of great examples throughout the state. I believe on the Big Island, they were able to convert one of their old vacant hospitals into shelter for those who need housing. And so I think one of the big things about the Ohana Zones bill is that, number one, we need to extend what happened a few years ago. I think at the time it was kind of like a pilot program, a one and done kind of thing, but I think the successes showed that this is something we need to sustain over time. Some of the exemptions that were afforded with the initial Ohana Zones bill should be put into statute and should be utilized for other type of programs. And I think that's what's kind of encapsulated in that bill is some of the exemptions that we was utilized previously. And I think it also really needs just some type of motivation for everyone to get back onto the same page, funding wise, and also kind of thinking outside the box. Because I think at the end of the day, Ohana Zones is supposed to utilize county and state lands in a more efficient manner to help this housing instability that we're facing throughout the community. So I think if we're able to extend Ohana Zones, hopefully we'll get that excitement back. Because it's truly a partnership amongst a lot of different agencies and people and entities to really get more housing for those that are facing houselessness.
And the way I see Ohana Zones rolling out on Oahu is that it's a place where there's a lot of collaboration.
Absolutely.
And at the heart of it is the community providers, the homeless service providers, but also state and county government. And so this is where maybe the notion of an office on homelessness and housing solutions really kind of starts to crystallize. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's coming out of some of the work that you and Chair Nakamura have done.
Yeah, and I think partnerships is key for a lot of things. And I think the governor's coordinator on homelessness has done a really good job. I think he really needs to have more stability in terms of where he's at and more defined roles. And I think this is what this new bill aims to provide. And I think it's really trying to take the homelessness component and the housing component, because it's really it's together. You have to look at both issues and in a long-term view to make sure that that's happening. And I think what that bill tries to do is it really puts in a lot of thought of what is his steps and what are the things that he needs to put together to really solve the issue of this overarching homelessness problem that we have. And so I think it's a good step in the right direction. I think it gives them the appropriate staff. It gives them a line item for funding. It puts them, it's still going to be appointed by the governor. So, I think the prominence is still going to be there, but it also gives them a home in Department of Human Services permanently with the staff that he needs. And hopefully over time, he'll be able to grow and continue those partnerships. I know with the new governor, it may be someone new, so sometimes it may not be someone that has to start. It may be someone that has to start all over again. But I think most importantly, the staff that they will have will now be civil servants, because we did not want to exempt them from civil service, because we felt that some people needed to have institutional knowledge moving forward within that office.
And I think that placement in Department of Human Services is so key, because you have the Medicaid program that's looking at ways to help support housing. You have the homeless support programs that are already there. So it's really a key place to place an office that's bringing people from homelessness to housing solutions.
That's right. And I think it's really also about working with the counties. I think a lot of times, especially on the neighbor islands, the governor's homeless coordinator really had to rely on the counties to do their part. Because of course his office is not statewide, it's more Honolulu focused, and that's fine. I think bringing in the counties is really important because they have a lot of resources and they have a stake within their community, and so he really needs to dig deeper into those partnerships, and I think that it is clearly outlined in the bill as well.
Can I just tell you, in the last 20 minutes when we've been talking about housing, I feel like we've gone like everywhere on this housing issue.
Absolutely.
So I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, and I'm very excited for what we might be able to talk about. I mean, there's still going to be a lot more work, but last thoughts, last takeaways for the work of the legislature and housing from you as vice chair.
Yeah, we have a lot more things that need to get done, because housing, of course, is just something that will be a challenge for many years to come, because I think we've just been so much behind in the amount that we've developed over the past decades, and so it's really catching up now even more than ever. But I think part of it is we have to work together. It's not something that we can do alone. It's something that we're going to have to collaborate. We're going to have to continue having the conversation, and we as legislators are going to have to continue to make it top of mind, because it's that important in my mind. And I think it's working with people like you and finance chair and speaker to make sure that every year we have something that we can deliver to the people of Hawaii to show that yes, we are making some progress. And although it's a huge issue, it might take a little while to see it come to fruition. But I firmly believe that in the next 5 years, it'll look better than the last 5 years.
All right, I'm going to check in on you in 5 years, whether or not Talk Story is happening, but I will be checking in with you in 5 years. Now, you can't go away. You're going to help me close this show out. So I want to thank Vice Chair Troy Hashimoto for joining me and talking about all of these important housing initiatives. I wanted to wrap up by talking about just a few of this kind of interesting things that are still popping. And what's going to happen over the next 3 weeks is that we enter conference. Tomorrow is the 48th day of the legislative session. We have second crossover, so all the bills from the House go back to the Senate, and bills from the Senate come back to the House, and then we go into conference. Some interesting bills to keep your eye on are the Hawaii Retirement Savings Plan, and really quickly, Kupuna Caucus co-convener Troy Hashimoto, you wear multiple hats. Tell me about Hawaii Retirement Savings Program.
Yeah, I think this will allow for anyone who does not have a sponsored program to the employer to have a savings plan for retirement. And so this is really helping our young people. I know AARP is really pushing for it, but I think they're forward looking and looking that, okay, the next generation, when they become eligible members of AARP, they need to make sure that they have retirement.
We have another Kupuna Care Program bill, Senate Bill 3113. What's that bill about, and what should people be looking out for that?
Yeah, so Kupuna Care and Kupuna Caregivers, it's two different programs, but I think over the pandemic, they realized that they needed to create some efficiencies so that they could move monies around, so that the continuum of care for our Kupuna is well taken care of. So this bill aims to make sure that we have big flexibility for our Kupuna in terms of when we need to administer care to them.
Okay, last bill I want to talk about, and I think everyone is going to be looking at this bill as we head to the final stretch, is Senate Bill 514, which is a bill that's looking at and considering a tax rebate. So this bill is resurrecting the governor's proposal of providing rebates to every person, every resident of the state of Hawaii. And so Rep. Hashimoto, an extra $100 in a constituent's pocket, what does that mean?
I think in these times with inflation and prices going up, I think it means a whole lot. And I think we're very thankful that the legislature is able to figure something out with this rebate. And I think it should be very exciting for a lot of people seeking relief.
And I think, what we're talking about too is we're looking at a kind of a graduated program. So for those making under 100,000, maybe a little bit more per person in their household. So keep our fingers crossed. We hope that tax rebate bill gets across the finish line. I want to thank all of you for joining us here at our second episode of Talk Story with House Majority. I want to leave you all with a community segment of our 2022 Women's Legislative Caucus Easter Basket Drive. Again, the Capitol is open. I want to welcome all of you to the Capitol here, especially on May 5th or May 4th when we will be closing on Sine Die. We want to welcome you all back to the Capitol, but here's our Easter Basket Drive. As you can see, the Capitol is open and we are back in business.
Advocate Bunny, who is such a good sport, the CEO and president of Aloha United Way, John Fink. If John Fink, our Easter Bunny, can come on out. We could not have done what we did with the pandemic without 211. So welcome, John, and you can go center stage right there. And our Easter duck, again, another good sport, the Chief Executive Officer and President of Hawaii Community Foundation, Micah Kane, for our Easter duck to come on out. Again, you all know how important AUW and HCF have been. Our 2022 Easter duck.
Today was the 23rd annual Women's Legislative Caucus Easter Basket Drive. It's a long-standing tradition for the House and Senate and other even executive branch agencies to come together, and we have put together Easter baskets for women that are transitioning from temporary shelters to more permanent housing. So our baskets contain household items, bedding, toiletries to help families that are transitioning. Well, we've always kept up our Easter basket drive even through the pandemic. In 2020 we held it as a virtual drive, so people were able to make donations online, and since then we've kept it up as a hybrid, so people can either donate online or bring down a physical basket. But what's really nice is to have everybody together, and I love always our tradition of making this long chain of passing baskets out to the trucks and seeing everybody literally pitching in to help others. So today's Easter basket donations are going to go to 4 organizations: PACT, Parents and Children Together, DVAC, Domestic Violence Action Center, as well as IHS and Salvation Army. And I know every year they look forward to these baskets, and they are very welcome support for the families that are going to be transitioning to permanent housing. So we typically donate to Oahu-based organizations. What's been nice about the hybrid, being able to give a monetary donation or a physical basket, is now we can help organizations on neighbor islands with those monetary donations.